Francis William Walter was born on March 20, 1910, in Gary, Indiana, the second child of 7 children, 4 boys and 3 girls, born to Conrad and Catherine Tice Walter. The family moved several times during Francis' childhood, as his father, Conrad, was a carpenter in the construction business, and went where the jobs were. Francis was about 9 years old when his family moved back to Lanesville, Indiana in 1919. Francis' mother, Katie, had very strict religious beliefs and lived very frugally, with the girls only having 2 dresses apiece, one for dress, the other for everyday, and for your bread, you were allowed butter or jam, but not both, as that would be wasteful. Katie sent every extra cent to the Catholic missions and said she wished she'd become a nun. Conrad and Katie were very strict, hard workers and instilled a strong work ethic in their children. Francis was a good student, excelled academically, and played on the basketball team. He graduated in 1928 from St. Mary's Catholic High School in Lanesville, Indiana. With the financial help of his uncle, John L. Walter, he attended Notre Dame College, where he studied engineering. While attending Notre Dame, Francis had the privilege of meeting Knute Rockne, who was the most famous football coach at that time. Due to the Great Depression, he only completed his freshman year. At the end of his freshman year, Francis returned to Lanesville, Indiana and worked in a stone quarry in Harrison County to help his family financially. Francis later moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where he worked with his family at their restaurant, the Manual Inn, located at 213 East Oak Street. He started working for South Central Bell Telephone as a lineman, and installing telephones, but after only a few years, he advanced to the engineering department, and moved his family from Louisville, Kentucky, to Owensboro, Kentucky. He took college classes at Brescia College to enhance his mathematical and communication skills for his new engineering position, and in his 50s took classes just to learn new handyman skills. After his younger brother Tony returned from service in World War II, Francis used his influence to help Tony get a job at South Central Bell Telephone Company too, and Tony worked there until he retired also. When Francis was 29, he had a whirlwind romance with Elva Tabor, whom he'd met when he went to a beauty school that had treatments for thinning hair. His usual beautician had the day off, and Elva gave him his treatment. It was love at first sight for Francis, and after a few dates he took Elva to meet his family at their family-owned business, Manual Inn, and, without informing Elva, told them Elva was the girl he was going to marry. Elva thought he was quite cocky and sure of himself, but she was crazy about him too, so they married on December 30, 1939, with Francis's 15-year-old brother Tony as his best man. When a picture was taken outside after the wedding, Tony said, "Francis got married, and he's going to sleep with a woman tonight." Tony was lovingly teased about that statement for years afterward. Francis and Elva bought their first home at 2127 Galbert Avenue in Louisville, Kentucky for $5,000. Patricia Ann Walter was born November 11, 1940, and David William Walter was born February 9, 1944. In 1948, Francis was promoted to the Central Engineering Department, which required a move to Owensboro, Kentucky. Elva was not happy about the move because Owensboro was known for the last public hanging in the United States in 1936. After several trips to Owensboro, Elva agreed to the move. The family moved from Louisville, Kentucky to 1302 West 3rd Street in Owensboro, Kentucky and rented until 1953, when Francis and Elva bought a brand new home at 1818 Westview Drive. Having grown up in a very poor family, Elva got her wish, not only to help with family finances, but to be around beautiful things, by working as a sales lady in the china, silver, crystal, and gifts department at Anderson's department store in Owensboro. Francis was a strict parent, but he was also a very caring and considerate family man, equally devoted to both his Walter family, as well as Elva's Tabor family. He loved his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and was never hesitant to share his faith with others. He was devoted and loving to Elva, Pat, and David, and after each child married, to their spouses, and he adored his granddaughters. In 1946, Francis became general chairman of the telephone company's cancer fundraiser and raised $1,200, which was a large amount of money in that day and time. Visiting family was a high priority, and Francis took his family to visit the Walter and Tabor families frequently, especially if family was in need, financially, for clothing, food, or emotional support, etc. Besides visiting local relatives in Louisville and southern Indiana, we always stopped to visit relatives who lived in the area when we were on vacation. Every year the family went on a major trip. Vacations to New York, Washington, D.C., the western United States to Mount Rushmore, Custer State Park, Yellowstone, Salt Lake City, Pikes Peak, Anaheim, California, Disneyland, Las Vegas, Grand Canyon, and Garden of the Gods in Colorado. Visiting Agatha Aldred in Washington, D.C., began our adventure in learning about and sharing the Walter family history. We visited the Frank and Clara Tice family in Cincinnati, Ohio, Frida Walter, her brother Joe, Doodle, and John, her father, at Frida's, and Martha Walker and children, Jack, Betty, Mary Jo and Jimmy in Lanesville, Indiana, and Addie Walter in New Albany, Indiana. Elva's family lived the Bowling Green area, and we visited them often too. Different members of both sides of the family stayed with us, sometimes for a few days, sometimes for weeks or months at a time. Clarence and Gladys, with children John and Walter, spent many of their vacations with us. When we lived in Louisville, after she aged out of the orphanage, Elva's half-sister made her home with us until she got married. Elva babysat with Helen's sons, Warren and Richard, and they often stayed the night when Helen had a late Avon party. After Elva's mother was diagnosed with cancer, she lived with us in Louisville, until she died. Pearl Tice and her brother Bill always stopped to visit us in Owensboro, Kentucky, on their way to Florida for the winter, and on their way home too. Conrad, Pop, and Uncle John were there at different times, both in Louisville and in Owensboro. One time when Pop was visiting, Elva had made some fresh horseradish that was really hot. Pop took a heaping spoonful, and Elva warned him that it was really hot. He said nothing was too hot for him, and put the whole spoonful in his mouth. We all watched him spellbound. Soon tears began to roll down his cheeks, his face turned bright red, he took out his handkerchief and blew his nose several times, and declared it was the first time his head had been cleaned out in years. We laughed about that often over the years. Family reunions and Lanesville reunions were looked forward to as fun times to reconnect with family and friends. Francis concentrated his humanitarian endeavors at speaking engagements, campaigning for the American Cancer Society for many years. He displayed leadership roles in the telephone company, and was a past president of the Pennyrile Council of Telephone Pioneers. He loved the outdoors, and was an honorary member of the Polar Bear Club. He was a valuable and dedicated employee of South Central Bell Telephone Company for 36 years, and due to his amazing ability to figure out mathematical problems, he advanced from a starting position as a lineman and telephone installer, to being a top-notch problem solver in their engineering department. David's high school math teachers were always amazed that Francis could so quickly and easily solve a problem, that they were having a problem solving. David consulted with his dad on the designs and in building his soapbox derby racers each year. They took a class in small machines, and worked on fixing up the lawnmower, garden tiller, and other small engine repair jobs. Francis and Elva loved traveling, and each year took our family to a new area of the USA to widen our horizons. Francis loved outdoor activities and learned to ski in his 50s, and he taught Pat and David how to ride bicycles, roller skates, swim and fish in the summer, and ice skate and go sledding in the winter, and later how to drive his stick-shift car. When David was a small boy, Francis traded in his Model T Ford for a newer model, and David would look out the window, mourn and say, "Car gone." Our family spent many happy fishing vacations at Kentucky Lake with the Zimmers, Elva's friend from Kresge's 10-cent store job days in Louisville. In later years, Francis and Elva loved to take their Airstream travel trailer to Florida for several weeks in the winter, to visit Tabor relatives, walk the beach looking for beautiful shells, and go fishing with Elva's brother, Everett, in his boat. Having lived through the Great Depression, Francis and Elva were both very frugal and had a great work ethic, which they instilled into Pat and David too. Francis used a payroll deduction to invest in the telephone company. He encouraged David to save part of his Courier Journal paper route money and invest it in South Central Bell telephone stock. David took his father's advice. Francis was always very involved in his children's lives. David says, "He took me hunting with his Essex 16-gauge single-shot shotgun. We hunted squirrels, rabbits, dove, and quail. One requirement was I had to eat what I killed. Dad made us a wooden swing set, Mom made a wardrobe, doll bed for Pat and other items we enjoyed over the years. My favorite father and son project was building my soapbox derby car." Francis always planted a big vegetable garden, and after sharing their bounty with others, Elva canned the rest during the summer. Eating at a nice restaurant only occurred once or twice a year, for very special occasions. Francis enjoyed learning how to do new things, and was very handy around the house, while Elva made all our clothes. They both enjoyed cooking and working together in the kitchen. Francis retired in 1972. It was a bittersweet time, as he was heartbroken that his beloved sister, Helen, was murdered by her husband John, right before he retired, but was delighted that so many Walter and Tabor family members were able to come help him celebrate at his retirement party. He worked as a consultant for Kelly Wilmore for a year, until he was diagnosed with lung cancer in 1973. He had lung surgery, did radiation and chemotherapy, without success over the next year, and died on November 1, 1974, at Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. During that year, he was a tower of strength, peace, and courage for his family and all who came to visit, and without any complaint, bitterness, regret, or why me. In fact, his faith never wavered, but just grew stronger and stronger. He appreciated so much the many visits with Elva's pastor, Brother Abbott, from Lewis Lane Baptist Church. This is the story of Francis William Walter's life as remembered by his children who loved him, Pat Walter Benson, and David Walter.